Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the PuriFi Pros Podcast. I'm here with Michael Hunter.
Nice to be here with everyone.
My co-host and water expert. I am not the water expert. I spent almost 20 years in air purification and in the HVAC industry. But you've had the advantage and the opportunity to spend time in both, in plumbing and water quality as well as air quality. So we thought today we'd bring some value and context to, do people really understand what's happening inside of their homes in terms of water quality? But also, if there was one that matters more, is there? Or do you need to solve for both? And if so, how?
A little history on water quality. I had a friend of mine that owned a bottling company. You see those big trucks that go around, deliver bottled water to homes and to businesses.
Yeah.
Right? And so for quite a while, I was using their service, and he told me one day, he was giving a little history, and he says, the Egyptians, some of their writings, that's where they found that they were actually boiling water, sanitizing the water. So dated all the way back to the Egyptians. Then the Greeks, they actually were looking at using cloth to filter the water to get the contaminants out. I think I'm going to probably butcher this. Hippocrates is his name, the father of medicine. That's the Hippocratic Oath. Yeah, right? Exactly. Yeah. So that's where that originated. So they were filtering, boiling. They knew back then that some of their issues that they were having were ingestion. What are we ingesting? And they found that just by doing those simple things, they're clearing up the water. Fast forward to our day, there's a whole lot more things going on in water. Inside our homes, inside public systems and all those. And really when it comes down to it, once people knew that there was bad stuff in water, they wanted to take care of it because they didn't feel good. And I think we discussed how much water do we ingest a day? Maybe a gallon if we're
aggressive water drinkers.
Diligent. Right. My friends that really exercise a lot, I got to drink this many, and they literally measure out their water for the day.
You see people at the gym walking around.
Yeah, they got jugs of it,
Right.
Me, I'm grabbing a bottle of water when I'm thirsty.
Right.
But there's that. So on the air side, how much air do we consume?
Way more. 2,000 gallons.
That's insane.
Of air every day. 3,000 if you're one of those exercisers with the big water jugs.
Yeah, you're breathing a little bit more rapidly.
Yeah.
Little kids and pets, they breathe more rapidly. They bring in a lot of air in and out quickly. So when it comes to the water side, it's really interesting because the plumbing industry actually had a corner on this market for water quality. They could have just owned the water quality business. But now you see guys like my friend who used to run a grocery outlet, now he's providing bottled water instead of the plumbing, people that are in your house doing the plumbing. And it was an education thing. Who was willing to do the education and the work behind it? On the water quality side for plumbing, what I learned when I started running that company was that I didn't have to buy those big bottles of water. I could buy a system within my house that could not only provide clean water for me to drink, but showering as well. Yeah. So I know, my skin felt different, because we had harder water where I was at. It smelled different, and we supposedly had some very good water. So the way I found out was I had to test it. So I had one of my plumbers come out. I said, we bought a bunch of tests. I said, okay, we're going to start testing people's water to advise them and give them options.
Yeah.
What can you do here? And that was the key. It was the test. Once people saw the test, they knew inherently that, their skin felt different at home versus, somewhere else, a hotel, and they didn't really know, was it softer? What was it? But when they talked about ingesting it, drinking it, you'd find bottles of water in their house because they wouldn't drink out of the tap.
Right.
Because they didn't want to drink that stuff that they were actually dumping on their bodies to clean. That became a real sticking point for us. And when I got that system in my home, it made all the difference in the world. We swear by it. We know it works because we measured it before and we measured it after. And we know what type of water we're getting and we know it's consistent. And we don't even think about drinking out of the tap anymore.
Yeah.
It's not even a second thought.
Yeah, whereas before that, it was okay. Or maybe when we were younger, like playing outside.
Yeah.
You drink from the hose.
Yeah.
And it was no big deal. You were grateful because you were so thirsty outside. Yeah. But then either parents or ourselves, we found out there's all this garbage and junk in there. And now it's like, I wouldn't touch this stuff. And I don't know if you've been in a situation before. We both traveled a lot for work, right? And you end up in a hotel. And for some reason, you're out of the bottled water or you don't want to run downstairs and you get that
brushing your teeth.
You get that that glass of tap water from the sink and you drink it and it's just like disgusting.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, I can't take
Gross.
this. I can't take this. You're like tasting every lead and aluminum and, chlorine, whatever else is in there. It's hard to go back once you've experienced it. And I think that clean air is very similar to that. I don't know that a lot of people have had the opportunity to really experience clean air. And once they have, they certainly don't want to go back.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And they don't know. I guess you would know if you're in a situation where, you're next to a big vehicle that's spewing out his nasty exhaust,
Right.
That's
the
not
black
clean.
Smoke tells you something.
Yeah. There's indicators. But in general, what's going on in the air? I feel it sometimes during the seasons, for sure.
Yeah.
It's like, I know particles are, allergens and things like that, dust storms, all those things affect us. But I don't know unless I measure it, kind of like I didn't know with the water. I understood it, there was something else, but I didn't know what to do about it.
Yeah, and I always think it's interesting, having been in this industry for so long, you become like, there's wine snobs, right?
Yeah.
And I mean that in the highest and best sense of the term.
For sure.
But then there's water snobs. And I'm one. I'd like, what do we have at the office? We have Fiji water.
Yeah.
I just like it the best. And I drink some other ones, Liquid Death. I like those are at different ends of the spectrum, Liquid Death and Fiji water. But it's purified, naturally sourced, assimilates well into my body. At least that's, my perception and what the measurements suggest. I'm not going back to tap water. And yet, in some cases, people are either not aware of or happy to consume what is in essence filthy air. But there are better ways to deal with that. And I think you mentioned one of the key things is measuring.
Yeah.
Right? And so what is something that somebody could do if they want to at least understand what's going on in their home, like the way you did with understanding what's going on in your water?
Simply have an air quality test. What do we have? You can visually see some things that are going on. Like, good example, you look at the supply registers and the air in your home.
And the supply is?
That's where it's exiting. It's like blowing on you.
Okay. That's the cold air or the hot air that we want.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The return air, or what we call the intake. Some people call it intake. It's a return. It's returning back to the system to be filtered.
Okay.
Hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully.
That's return air. But you usually see on a return, you see dirt, like where the filter is going to go. You see things like that, and you want to vacuum it and do those things on the outside. You just know that, like, oh, that's bad. But when you see dirt on the things that's blowing out the air, that's a very good indicator that you have possibly a negative pressure situation going on in your house, where it's not letting the air go out. It's actually pulling it back into the system, and now it's sticking to the supply registers. That's a bad deal. The other side, that could also indicate that maybe your ductwork, there's some loose fittings around there, and now the air is pulling into your house aside from the air within the ductwork. And so that is something a contractor should really be looking at to help you out with that.
Well, and that's a real nice visual way for the average consumer in their home to just look up. Yeah. Right? I mean, that's priority one, maybe, is look up and check your supply register. If you see dust collecting, something is not right.
That's a miss.
You need to get it checked out.
For sure.
And you want to, of course, clean those returns and, whatever else, but look for those issues on the supply side. The other thing that makes me think about that is the air filters that are installed in people's homes. First of all, I guess you need to make sure that filter fits. We were just talking about that a few minutes ago. You go to somebody's property, it's commercial property that you were at the other day, and they have these brand new air filters, but there's 1-inch gaps all the way around the filter because it's the wrong size. And air will always travel the path of least resistance. And so if you pull out your air filter, this is another trick. I mean, there's obvious gaps, but sometimes it's not sealed even when your filter is the right size per se. Right. You pull that filter out, if you see dust going around that filter and into your system, you've got a problem.
If it's getting to the ductwork immediately after that filter, big question mark.
Yeah.
Wow, is this doing its job?
Because air travels the path of least resistance.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So as we think about, water versus air, really, I mean, being realistic, it's both. We want clean water and we want clean air. But we would say, if we rewind 20 years ago, clean air is the new clean water. There's been a clean water revolution over the past 20 years. And now it's a multi-$100 billion industry. And people are super conscious about it. All kinds of options in the store that you can choose from, or all kinds of technology in your home. But the way I think about it as it relates to clean air is, one, we've been through a lot over the past 2 years, right? We learned now what we learned about clean water then, or what was not clean water, about dirty water.
Right.
We learned what was in our air over these past 2 years. It dramatically affected our lives. And I don't know about anybody else. I don't want to go through that again. I want to have some control. But there's also particles that are in the air that can trigger issues. And a little gross fact for everybody is we swallow at least 2 tablespoons of dust and dust mites and dirt and debris every single day.
I could have gone without hearing that.
Right. 2 tablespoons. I mean, think about that. Just scoop it up, shove it down. But a lot of times that's going into our lungs and our bloodstream. The way I think about it is, if I took those 2 tablespoons and I poured them into this bottle of water, would you drink it?
No chance.
What about for $10?
Not interested.
Okay. But
now, if I was 10 years old, I might have done
it. Yeah, my son would do it for $10. But it's the same thing. It's just we need to take action on the invisible threat, which I think comes back to what you're talking about in measurement.
Yeah. It's really important to understand that the air we're breathing, it's kind of like the water. You know when you're drinking really good water. You just know it. Kind of like you talked about Fiji, right? It's like, what's the indication of good water? It doesn't have an extra taste to it, right? It doesn't have that extra something. If I grab a bottle of water that's not what I like to drink, but just because I'm thirsty, I drink it, but then there's an aftertaste or there's an initial taste.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I know that's not what the stuff that I like, but I'm doing it anyway. It's kind of like, you know what? Now that I know I'm breathing those tablespoons of dirt, like, great. Is there an option? And there is an option. You can have better bottled water. You can have better air. And like we've discussed before, is what's the smell of clean air? There isn't.
Right.
It doesn't smell.
Exactly.
And I talked to my wife, and maybe I'm popular for saying this, and so, honey, forgive me. Yeah. But
fingers crossed.
Yeah. So we'll see how this goes. So she likes plugins, candles. She always has ever since. And I always asked her, I said, do you like the candles because of the smell? Because of the scent? She says, yeah. I said, do you like the scent better than what the house smells like other than when you have the candles on? Meaning the difference. She says, yeah. I said, so what we're trying to do really is not have this nice smell. We're just trying to mask the other one. We're trying to not smell the other one.
Right.
And so when I started purifying my home, she's like, oh, it smells great. It doesn't smell in here. Like there's no smell. It's not like our house had a bad scent, but it wasn't the scent like after cooking, especially like fish or onions. And she really likes garlic, a lot,
right? Right.
And but the after scent didn't linger. Less like the aftertaste that we had with the bad drinks, that didn't linger. And so she understood that, I don't have to turn these scents on. And it's amazing. We have a bunch of these scented cubes, wax cubes that we used to use. And she used to buy them by the droves. Like every month she would buy all these different scents. And now we've got all these things sitting in a drawer and she barely uses them. It's because she doesn't have to mask the smell anymore.
Right.
She still likes it. She'll turn it on once in a while.
Yeah.
But it goes away quickly because of the system we have. And we can measure when she turns that on, there's a rise in particles in our house.
Right.
So we know it's not good for us, ultimately, because now we can measure it all the time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a really good example. And it's funny that you mentioned that because we have a customer who had the product installed and had our technology installed, which has sensors and it's measuring air quality. And he was so excited about how clean his air was after our technology was installed. And then he texts me one day and he says, I think there's something wrong, with your product. And this was a close friend, so he just texted me directly. And I said, well, I doubt that. I said, but the sensor never lies. And I said, tell me what has changed inside of your home. And he said, well, nothing that I'm aware of. And he wasn't home yet. And he said, but I'll get home and I'll check it out. Later on, I got a text, a couple hours later, he sent me a text. He says, I found the culprit. and it was a whatever plugin, I don't know what the brand was, but it was a scent plug-in that had been plugged in a few feet from our sensor, and it was spiking his particle counts and his pollution counts inside of his home. And he said he spoke with his spouse and said, "We're not doing that anymore." And I don't know where it went from there. I'll leave that with him. But Godspeed. But the thing is, anything that's adding scent is also adding pollutants. Yeah, that's the short story. And so a lot of times we pose that interesting question to people. Well, do you know what clean air smells like? And it takes them a second to go, well, shoot, do I? What does clean air smell like? And the answer is it smells like nothing. Yeah. It's pure. And then the next question that kind of makes them think is, well, shoot, my house smells like, A, B, C, and D. It's either good or it's bad or it's whatever. But how about no smell? And it's just pure and clean.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it changes the game, because then you don't feel like you have to change anything, mask it.
Right.
Yeah.
And in fact, when I had our technology installed, it's funny, as you say that, it reminds me, people would walk into our house when I was trying it for the first time, even before I was with PuriFi. And people would walk into my house afterwards and they would smell, and they go, oh my gosh, it smells so interesting in here. It smells like nothing. And I was like, oh, interesting. And then they say, the follow-up was, it smells so clean.
Yeah.
And that came from them before I was even with PuriFi, and I was just installing the product for the first time in my home. And that was a real insight for me. Somebody walks in the home, smells like nothing, smells clean, just a random person off the street who says that. That's really what we should be looking for, just like the water. It's like you said with the water. We don't need any weird aftertaste coming with our water, and we don't need any weird smells or whatever else in our home if we really want clean air.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. The biggest thing to me is when I'm drinking clean water, breathing fresh air, it changes the way I feel. I mean, if I get a nice, good, clean bottle of water, I'm like, man, that makes me feel different.
That's true.
Like, for sure. And there's no placebo when you're measuring it. Like, out of my tap,
right?
I know what's coming out.
Yes.
It's not, I think it's clean because somebody said it was clean.
Yeah.
No, we measured before and after, and we know.
And that's just like it is now, or should be now, with air, right? We should be measuring. It's not enough to put a device in the room, plug it in, and say, okay, everything's good, or change an air filter, or install something in the ductwork of somebody's home and say, hey, I promise, everything's going to work. We have to prove it, or the consumers should ask at least for the proof, the same way you do, with water in your home and testing it. And that way that you have what you need and you've done everything that you can. Now, that being said, you and I have been in these industries for a long time. It's 20 years for me, 30 years for you. And so part of what we recognize and want people to understand is you don't have to do this alone, right? If you have questions or you want an air quality test in your home and you don't have the sensor, or you're not sure which sensor to buy, you can call us for recommendations, or you can have us come out, or have a PuriFi Pro come out to people's homes. They'll measure, they'll educate, help you understand what's going on, so that way you can have clean air and clean water at the same time.
Absolutely. How it's tested is so important.
Yes.
Who's testing?
Not all sensors are created equal. Where you measure matters. What you measure matters. So, reach out. Encourage people to reach out to PuriFi Labs and contact us, comments, whatever it takes, and we'll make sure to support you.
Absolutely.
All right. Okay, we'll see you next time.
See ya.